The Kravari Empire mocked human camouflage, laughed at our tactics, until their commanders started dropping one by one, and they couldn't even find the body. The mist hung low over the jungles of Lornaxus IV, curling like a living thing through the twisted alien foliage. High above the forest floor, Imperial dropships carved through the sky in perfect formation, their engines rumbling with mechanical arrogance. Soldiers of the Kravari Empire, disciplined, pristine, and adorned in armor polished to an unnecessary sheen, descended in waves, fanning out into the lush terrain like they already owned it. Commander Trivar stood at the edge of the newly established forward base, his 4 eyes scanning the horizon through the thick haze. Behind him, rows of Kravari troops laughed as they examined pieces of captured human gear, a ghillie suit, mud-caked boots, and a rifle that looked absurdly primitive compared to the Empire's plasma weaponry. Pathetic, Trivar muttered, poking the shredded fabric with a clawed finger. They call this camouflage? Another officer chuckled, her mandibles clicking in amusement. These humans fight like vermin, always hiding, afraid to face us. Trivar allowed a thin smile. Let them play their little games in the mud. We'll flush them out by week's end. But miles away, unseen and unheard, Sergeant Cade Warren lay motionless beneath a nest of woven leaves, his heartbeat as slow and steady as a clock wound by death itself. He watched the enemy through his scope, its lens dialed precisely to cut through the jungle mist. The sniper's perch was a marvel of patience and instinct, tucked into the crook of a tree, its bark smeared with thermally dampening paste and native moss. Every inch of his body was wrapped in adaptive camouflage, a second skin that mirrored the environment in real time. He hadn't moved in 2 hours, and he wouldn't for several more. Cade's orders were simple: disrupt, disable, and dismantle. The Kravari were overconfident, loud, and unimaginative, a perfect storm of targets for a man trained to kill with silence. The jungle was his ally. The Kravari called it hostile terrain, Cade called it home. Through the scope, he tracked a group of officers gathered around a hollow table. They gestured arrogantly, weapons slung lazily at their hips. None wore helmets, none expected death. That was their first mistake. His fingers settled on the trigger. The shot, when it came, was like a breath, soft, invisible, final. The Kravari commander's head snapped back, and his body crumpled to the jungle floor. For half a second, nobody reacted. Then chaos erupted. Soldiers shouted, weapons drawn, scanning the tree line, firing into shadows. Plasma bolts lit up the forest, burning leaves and branches, but hitting nothing. They had no direction, no source, just panic. Cade had already shifted his position by the time they reached the body. He moved like fog, low and slow, guided by memory and instinct. His rifle, an old Earth model enhanced with human ingenuity, was slung across his back. He didn't need to fire again. Not yet. One shot was enough to shatter their illusion of safety. Back at base, Trivar was silent. The reports had come quickly, laced with confusion and stammering. A sniper? Impossible. No heat signatures had been detected. No movement traced. The Kravari had scoured the area with drones and thermal scans, and found nothing. He paced, his jaw clenched tight. "We're being toyed with," he said finally. "A human sniper? Alone?" The intelligence officer, young and clearly rattled, nodded. "They believe it was a direct kill. No ricochet. Clean shot." "From how far?" 400 spans. "Through heavy brush." Trivar hissed. That was impossible. No Kravari sniper could make that shot without enhanced optics and atmospheric calibration systems. And even then, the jungle warped trajectories. A feat like that required not just skill, it required madness. He ordered increased patrols, broader sweeps. They launched drones, sensors, motion-activated mines. But none of them caught anything. Not even a footprint. Cade watched it all unfold through his scope. Every new drone was noted. Every squad marked. Every shift in formation mapped. He wasn't here to win a battle. He was here to fracture a war. As the sun dipped behind the jagged peaks to the west, Cade finally allowed himself a slow exhale. He slid a nutrient strip from a pocket in his sleeve and bit into it without looking away from the scope. His focus remained locked on a mobile relay unit wheeled into the open by 2 Kravari engineers. The comms tower was lightly guarded, under the assumption that no human could reach it unnoticed. Another mistake. He adjusted his aim. Wind, elevation, temperature, all accounted for. He squeezed the trigger. One engineer dropped instantly, a crater where his throat had been. The other fell trying to scramble back into cover, bleeding out beside the console. The relay sparked violently and fell silent. Within minutes, the entire section was cut off from command. Comm links crackled with static. Imperial units barked to each other over short range, disorganized and frustrated. The humans had planned this with precision. Cade's actions weren't random, they were surgical, targeting officers, comms, and morale. Each shot echoed louder than a battalion's march. He remembered the briefing back on the carrier ship Resolute. The general had stood before the group of snipers and special forces operatives, his tone grim but proud. They think they can out-tech us. Let them. You're not here to fight like they do. You're here to fight like humans do. Dirty, quiet, patient. They laugh at our camouflage because they don't understand it. That's your advantage. They'll never see it coming. Cade had nodded once and walked out without a word. He wasn't in this for speeches. He was in it for result. Now, lying in a tree as alien insects crawled over his boots and sweat pooled in his collar, he felt the weight of that responsibility, but not fear. Fear was for people who didn't know what they were capable of. He didn't view the Kravari as monsters. He viewed them as arrogant, and arrogance was a weakness. Down below, patrols moved with nervous haste. The soldiers kept glancing into the trees, fingers twitching on triggers. Cade didn't blame them. They had no concept of what they were facing. His next shot came an hour later. This time, through a plasma generator that powered 2 nearby sensor turrets. The explosion ripped through the jungle like thunder, drawing attention and panic away from where Cade slipped deeper into the undergrowth. Behind the smoke and chaos, the legend of the sniper began to take root. Whispers formed among the Kravari troops, of a ghost in the jungle, a killer with no scent, no heat, no shadow. The word Kataran began to spread, a mythical being from Kravari folklore said to stalk dishonorable warriors in the dark. Cade didn't hear those whispers. He didn't need to. He saw them in the way the enemy moved, cautious now, slower, no longer laughing. By the 4th kill, the officers had stopped walking in group. They barked orders from behind shields, keeping to enclosed bunkers and command tank. Drones buzzed constantly in the air, but Cade stayed one step ahead. He never used the same perch twice. He buried thermal baffles in the ground, designed to emit decoy heat signatures. He led pursuers into traps, wasting their time and energy. Still they searched. Still they found nothing. By the end of the 2nd week, Imperial scouts reported entire platoons refusing to deploy into jungle zones marked with sniper kills. Desertions were whispered about. Mental stability evaluations. Rain pattered against the leaves in soft, rhythmic taps as the jungle of Lornaxus IV descended into a dusk that seemed to crawl out of the ground itself. The Kravari Empire's soldiers moved like blind giants through the thick underbrush, metal boots crunching alien roots and pushing past vine-covered trunks with frustration masked as determination. They were tired, spiritually more than physically, and though they wouldn't say it aloud, every pair of eyes flicked toward the shadows too often to call it coincidence. Some had begun painting sigils on their armor, symbols from ancient Kravari mythology, meant to ward off spirits. They didn't know what they feared, only that it wore no uniform, cast no heat, and bled no light. They had stopped calling him a sniper. Now, he was simply the ghost. Cade Warren watched them through his scope, unmoving, yet always present. His body blended seamlessly into the side of a moss-covered cliff, camo mesh pulsing faintly in harmony with the shifting light of the forest canopy. He had counted 62 confirmed kills since landing, and he remembered every face, every uniform, every precise second the bullet left his barrel and rewrote the war. This wasn't about numbers anymore. This was psychological. The Kravari had begun deploying special units, elite stalkers, trained in stealth and thermal warfare. Unlike the standard troops, they didn't stomp around barking commands. They moved in silence, low to the ground, sensors sweeping, rifles drawn and steady. They were good. But not good enough. Cade lay submerged in mud for over 9 hours waiting for one of them to pass, heartbeat slowed, breathing shallow through a filtered reed. When the soldier finally stepped within 10 feet of him, scanning the area with a curved tri-lens visor, Cade did nothing. He didn't raise his weapon. He didn't move an inch. He didn't need to. The Kravari's eyes passed over him twice before moving on. The sniper remained a shadow within shadows, and when the stalker turned his back, Cade rose in perfect silence and dropped him with a single, suppressed shot to the base of the skull. The enemy hit the ground like a sack of wet sand, never making a sound. That night, Cade placed the soldier's helmet on a spike, facing the Kravari command post. Across its front, smeared in native bloodroot, was a symbol the Kravari knew well, the mark of a Kataran death. He didn't believe in superstition, but he believed in fear. And fear had become his most effective bullet. Elsewhere in the Kravari war tent, General Vorax pored over a map strewn with blinking red markers, units, patrols, asset. He was larger than most Kravari, his armor dark and scarred, his mandibles unusually sharp from years of combat chewing. When he'd arrived, the troops had cheered, believing his presence alone would stop the bleeding. He had studied the humans before, fought against their fleets in orbit. But this was something different. None of our scans have picked up a living human signature in the last 3 days, his adjutant muttered. That doesn't mean he's dead, Vorax growled. The officer looked uncertain. Perhaps he's withdrawn. He's not done until we are, Vorax replied. And right now, he's hunting. The general dispatched full-spectrum satellites, electromagnetic pulse sweepers, and audio triangulation drones. But even with their advanced tech saturating the jungle, the sniper's presence remained an absence. No heat, no sound, no trace. Only bodies. Always bodies. In the deep green corridors of the forest, Cade worked through another target list. This time, the objective wasn't simply to kill, it was to collapse command structure entirely. With communications scrambled and morale crumbling, the Kravari still had one pillar left, General Vorax himself. Taking him down wouldn't just end the campaign. It would send a message through the entire empire. Humanity wasn't a problem to be solved, they were a species to be feared. The opportunity came unexpectedly. Recon drones intercepted chatter about a planned morale rally, an address from Vorax to the remaining regiments, to be broadcast live across the planetary network. It was scheduled for sunset, in the main outpost plaza, built from scorched jungle and reinforced steel. The general would stand exposed, armored only lightly to present strength, surrounded by troops. Cameras would roll. The message: strength, resilience, dominance. Cade read the intercepted data twice, then memorized the position coordinate. He folded the microscreen away, checked his gear, and began the approach. It would take 22 hours of crawling, avoiding sensors, bypassing new heat traps, and working around motion mines. He had one shot, one chance. On the final day, just before dawn, he reached the cliff overlooking the plaza. His camouflage bled into the rock, a ghost pressed against stone. He adjusted the bipod legs of his rifle and leveled the scope. Wind was low. Humidity high. Distance: 1,420 meters. Shot difficulty: maximum. He waited. Below, soldiers gathered in neat rows. Vorax stepped onto the raised platform, his presence commanding despite the rising tension. He began to speak, voice projected through embedded helmet speakers. "We are Kravari. We do not bow to ghosts. The crowd roared, but it was strained, uncertain. "We do not fear shadows." Cade's finger slipped onto the trigger. He slowed his breath, heart beating once per second. "We do not." The rifle bucked silently. A fraction of a second later, General Vorix's head snapped back, a hole the size of a coin replacing his third eye. His body collapsed before his guard even turned. The crowd froze. Then chaos. Soldiers screamed, scrambled, fired into the sky, into trees, into each other. A camera drone caught the moment perfectly. A leader struck down mid-speech, no enemy in sight. The feed cut to black seconds later. Cade was already gone, moving through a pre-planned escape route of narrow gullies and thermal pockets. Drones swarmed the cliffs, scanning wildly, but they found only an empty shell casing tucked into the rock, inscribed with a simple message. Still watching. The Kravari command fell apart overnight. Officers blamed one another. Units refused deployment. Retreat orders clashed with attack mandate. And in the gaps, human reinforcements landed without resistance, sweeping across the outer zones and reclaiming control with barely a shot fired. By the end of the week, Lornaxus IV was no longer an occupied planet. Among Kravari ranks, stories spread far beyond the battlefield. Not just of the sniper, but of the one they never saw. The Empire redrafted its doctrine. New training modules were implemented, focused on counter-sniping, camouflage detection, and psychological warfare. But they were already too late. The myth had taken hold. And myths are far harder to kill than men. Cade returned to the Resolute 3 days later, covered in filth, his eyes hollow but clear. The debrief was short. The commander didn't ask questions, only offered a nod. Cade didn't salute. He walked past, into the darkened corridors of the ship, a man whose war was written in silence. He wasn't a hero. He was a message, and the galaxy had heard it loud and clear.